if the result of America unleashing the full might of its arsenal and its air power on Iran is that the world now has to pay a toll to go through the Strait of Hormuz, and by the way, who knows what the second order effects of that are on the Bab el-Mandab Strait or the Strait of Malacca, then it is a catastrophic reversal for American power.
Well, keeping in mind the pressure for an end to the conflict, even if it's a passing end to the conflict, Reuters is reporting now that the US Army has used up, most of its global stockpile of highly accurate long-range missiles in this war. What are you thinking, Josh? What are you thinking, Joe? Look, the president's been talking about talks between America and Iran. We're hearing more about talks between Iran and Oman. But either way, it is about a way to open up the Strait of Hormuz. And now we're seeing some, pretty authoritative reporting that a deal is taking shape there that does, and this is the bit that really resonates, the deal that's now on the table in those Oman-Iran talks would involve, certainly from the Iran point of view, they say, we'll carry on charging. We'll carry on charging for shipping, service charging, they say, and security charges, which is maybe another fancy word for protection racketing. But either way, they are getting the money they say that they've always wanted, and maybe even more importantly, recognising their authority, the control of the Strait of Hormuz, which is a world-changing development. Josh?
Well, I think if we zoom back here, what's extraordinary is that the Strait of Hormuz reopening is really only a return to status quo ante, and it's not even a return to status quo ante because you are talking about potential toll charges on it, so it would be worse than the situation was before the war. So really, this is shaping up to be a generational humiliation for America. I mean, I don't think that's an exaggeration. If the result of America unleashing the full might of its arsenal and its air power on Iran is that the world now has to pay a toll to go through the Strait of Hormuz, and by the way, who knows what the second order effects of that are on the Bab el-Mandab Strait or the Strait of Malacca, then it is a catastrophic reversal for American power.
Or just recognising Iranian authority in the Strait of Hormuz. That's a principle that Marco Rubio was saying not so very long ago would be a global development.
It's a disaster. I mean, it's the end of freedom of navigation as we know it, which is something that America and Britain before it has always sort of supported and led on, and it's look, we don't know how it's going to play out.
No.
But fundamentally, America has taken this enormous gambit, doesn't seem to have had a strategic plan in place, because it was always likely that Iran would play the Strait of Hormuz card, because that was its ace that it had up its sleeve, and America doesn't seem to have an answer to it, because President Trump doesn't want to fight the kind of war that would be required to actually destroy and dismantle the Iranian regime.
If that could be done by a land invasion, even if that could be done.
Look, you would think it could be done with the ultimate deployment of American power, as it was in Iraq, but he doesn't want to fight that kind of war for perfectly understandable reasons. But if he didn't want to fight that kind of war and wasn't willing to, then he shouldn't have launched this initial attack, which doesn't seem to have worked out for him at all. It's now affecting his domestic popularity, cost of living in America and all over the world. It's corroding Bibi Netanyahu's popularity in Israel. And as time goes by, and as we start to learn the details of whatever deal is emerging, it really is looking like an enormous miscalculation.
Yes. Yeah, well, I mean, look, the president sort of keeps on saying that he plans to sort of seize by ground power the Karg Island, for example, which is the oil depot for Iran.
How many times has he said that?
Many times, and it hasn't happened.
It's the boy who cried wolf.
And will it really happen? Which is why I'm sort of sceptical about the idea of a land offensive seizing control of Iran. I mean, yes, I suppose if it became another Vietnam, they could land in enormous numbers. There would be enormous losses, and the numbers that have been lost so far are too many for many Americans to bear. The idea of the cost of a major engagement.
The moment when that was a serious possibility has passed.
Yeah,
to my mind. I mean, that I was getting pictures on the weekend of a friend at Ben Gurion Airport in Tel Aviv. And there were huge round the block people because all the flights have been cancelled because the American jets were all coming in to refuel. They were all ready to go, and then they didn't go. And Iran has realised that it has the whip hand here. It can call Trump's bluff time and again, and Trump isn't willing to go all in.
No. I mean, look, independent academics in war strategy are very clear. They consider this is a strategic defense for a defeat for the United States and for the Trump administration. Where the Iranian regime, the appalling Iranian regime is concerned, their war aim is just to survive, to carry on
But it looks like they're
there.
going to do more than just survive.
Yeah.
It looks like they're going to come out possibly stronger than they went in, because
indeed. Well,
yes, okay, their missiles have been devastated, and their stocks have been devastated, and their economy's taken a hit, and obviously their nuclear program's taken a hit. So let's not pretend it's all rosy in Tehran. It's not. But if they come out intact, having survived, in some ways their prestige increases, and they have this ability to charge a toll. This is not a small thing to charge a toll on the Strait of Hormuz. This could be an enormous source of income.
This is like the deal maker being completely outmaneuvered. If this was a chess game, you would have seen, the sort of reigning champion, as Trump probably thought he was, probably completely flouncing off now because his king's been checkmated. That's the point, is that this has been I think you're right, Josh, this has been a sort of significant gamble that I think he thought it's the classic, on paper it makes sense, on paper it's fine, on paper we have all of it, and then suddenly the Iranians kind of just they did outmaneuver him.
But Trump wasn't playing 4D chess. He's been paintballing. I mean,
without enough paint in the trunk to be able to shoot enough, and that's the interesting thing about this, is that the narrative from Trump's side's really changed. All this kind of, he's stopped. Do you remember Caroline Leavitt was always talking about, he's stopped 5 wars and he's done this and that, and it was all that big thing, and it was about the nuclear program, and it's now become a row about that bit of water. That's what it's become about now.
Which was open when the war started. But it is more than that. I think what you're saying is interesting, because this has consequences for global straits and what happens, who owns what. Do you end up getting into a military row? Do you have to sign deals in order to keep trade moving? And that is a huge issue that you could imagine Trump turning up to a G20, a G8, whatever, and everyone going, thanks, mate, you've totally stuffed us, because we're now in having to have a negotiation about getting our boats through somewhere, which was never on the cards. You've completely sort of changed the way that seas will be navigated, that things will be moved around, and yet we are in a huge global economy where we don't have the bandwidth for that. There isn't the money in the system. There aren't the armed forces and naval vessels to be able to help police that. But you could see a lot of countries thinking, well, I'm going to have a crack at this. Well,
there might be some money in it.
We could start charging the Germans to go through the channel. Why not? Well, that could end well.
God, the row over fish will really escalate as well.
Okay, well, look, we may. I nearly said come to a climax. We may see it coming to yet another peak in the course of the next 24, 48 hours, if it turns out those Iran talks do result in some sort of deal, which means, as it turns out, the ships can enter on the Iranian side of the Strait. They exit on the Oman side, but in the course of that, in the document, it amounts to you can exercise control here. But I
don't think whatever deal they come to is unlikely to last for that long, because this fundamental situation is untenable for America. It can't really accept that level of defeat and just walk away with its tail between its legs.
Well, it'll call it a resounding victory.
Well, it can call it what it likes, but everyone can see what's happening here. And I think that the world really can't afford, as Joe says, to be held hostage by Iran in this way indefinitely. So I can see this being a running sore on global affairs for years.
And it's at the tipping point in the run-up to the midterm elections. And the Americans have taken a significant hit now when it comes to inflation, the cost of living, the pricing on the shelves in Main Street. That's not forgotten. The spike in prices under Joe Biden, and I'm not talking here about the MAGA base. I'm talking about the key independent floating voters. They did not forgive Joe Biden for the rise in prices that followed the COVID pandemic, although some of that had a lot to do with the previous.
And this is not the narrative that Trump would want going into those midterms.
No, he says he doesn't mind, but an awful lot of people, he does mind, and an awful lot of people in his party mind a great deal.